The fire started on a Sunday night, and I woke up to a text at 4:30 a.m. on that morning from Alicia, our executive director from On the Move. "Roll call, where are you?" It said, "Are you safe?" It was to our entire leadership team. The program that I run is accountable to nearly 800 young people, some homeless and sleeping outside, some in shelters or couch surfing, and some just renting their first apartments after years in the foster care system. In Napa, the fire was coming at us from every direction except from the south. And in Santa Rosa, the Tubbs fire was only 2 miles away from our center. With evacuation orders in place, we couldn't get to our buildings, and we couldn't get to our young people. I didn't have to tell my team to go find them. They were already on it. They called and texted and used Facebook, and we went through months of old sign-in sheets to make sure that we weren't forgetting anybody. And by noon that day, we had reached every single one of them. We had found all 800 of those kids. The fires were burning all week. And in the pictures that everybody saw, that red glow on the horizon, but being there in person, you could feel those fires. The trees crackling and things exploding and ash everywhere. We opened our centers for a few hours on Tuesday and Wednesday, and hundreds of young people flocked to us. They came in panicked and scared and covered in smoke. They wanted to see that our staff was there and that our centers were standing. If we were okay, then they could be okay. We provided hot meals and cell phone charging stations. That second week is when the local assistance centers opened. We got together with FEMA and county officials in Napa, and a group of us worked all night, every night, for many nights, to set thresholds for emergency aid and health and safety. We served 1,200 additional people in those first couple of days. For weeks, everything was closed. Buses didn't run and schools didn't open. Many of our young people weren't able to work, and when you live paycheck to paycheck, 1 week makes a huge difference. Even our most stable youth, those that are living 2 or 3 to each bedroom, even they were in jeopardy. Before the fires, the occupancy rate in Santa Rosa was 98%, and overnight it hit 100. Suddenly, landlords could raise the rent and replace their tenants within hours. We knew that we had to get cash into the hand of those young people, because if they lost their apartments, it would be virtually impossible for them to get it back. The relief grant from Tipping Point came exactly when we needed it. We issued 164 checks to young people in need by the end of October, and we're 317 this last month. Tipping Point was the first organization to reach out. It was the first check in the bank. The investment, your investment, legitimized us, and since then, we've raised and distributed over $1 million out onto the streets in both Napa and Santa Rosa. Thank you. Everyone has been affected in some way. Jesus is 19 and he works at our front desk in Napa. His dad is a field worker and they lived on a winery that burned down. He spent the past several weeks living with friends and relatives, but that's not going to last forever. We don't know where he'll go because right now just getting through the day is hard enough. He doesn't talk as much anymore. Hundreds of young people made it to the evacuation shelters, and then they started panicking. Kids that I've worked with for years, kids that have survived so much more than fire, kids that come from families of abuse and drug addiction. But to all of a sudden be thrown back into that chaos and stress triggered them. Now, many are afraid to go to sleep, and a lot of many can't go to bed without talking to me. Good night, I'll see you in the morning. You promise? Yes, I promise. When you stack trauma on top of trauma on top of trauma, it's eventually going to manifest itself into unhealthy behaviors, and for our kids, that could have devastating effects. Since the fires, just being there is the most important thing that we have offered. I've heard myself so many times repeat the same line that others have said to me. This is not your time to give up. I was a street kid here in San Francisco in the 90s. And it was the same mix of that persistence and authenticity and love that saved my life. My parents divorced when I was 6 years old, and soon after, my mother was diagnosed with what was then called multiple personality disorder. So she'd walk into one room as one person, and then she'd walk out, and then she'd come in another room a completely different person. When I was 11, she got too sick to work, and she went in and out of the hospital. Sometimes my little sister, Sarah, and I were alone for weeks, and we ate a lot of pancakes because that's the only thing that I knew how to cook. When neighbors started asking where my mom was, Sarah and I decided that we had to leave the house. I had just turned 12, and she was 9. We were together for a couple of weeks before Sarah was picked up and placed into the foster care system. I found a street family, 10 other teenagers that would care and protect me. Living outside meant I was always sick. One day I was sitting on Market Street, like 3 blocks from here, I realized when I walked over today, and I had pneumonia for the 8th or 9th time. I had this pain in my chest, and my breathing was shallow, and I had this horrible fever again. I'd never been to church, but I started negotiating with whatever higher power I'd hoped existed. If I live through this, I said, if I survive this night, I will dedicate my life to helping kids just like me. Please just let me make it through. And no joke, the next day, an outreach worker from Larkin Street comes up to me, and she gives me a bag of food and a message. She says, "Get up, there's a bed for you." And when you're homeless, especially when you're as young as I am, you get approached by every organization. And back then, there was no coordinated intake or nothing tailored to meet the multiple needs of young people, and a lot of staff turnover in the nonprofit. I felt anonymous on the streets, and everywhere I went to get help, I was anonymous too, in the food pantries and in the training programs and at the clinic. But that outreach worker, she came back every single day, telling me to get up and come inside. And she reminded me that I had options. And finally, I followed her. Larkin helped me get my GED, and when I was 17, I moved out of the city. I went to community college, transferred to UC Davis, eventually got my master's in public policy, and out of the 11 of us from that original street family, I'm the only one that's still alive. On the Move was the first group to start hanging motivational signs around Santa Rosa, to see our young people gather together and laugh and smile. It was really nice. It was really healing. I'm glad that we're a place that young people can trust in time of crisis, but I'm proud that we're so much more than that. We've supported these young people as they've started and scaled their own organizations and as they've written and implemented policy. And we've seen them become good parents, breaking that generational cycle for their children. As we turn towards recovery in Napa and Sonoma, it'll be an opportunity for young people, a chance for them to really rise up and be at the forefront of this positive change. Thank you for showing up in the middle of an emergency and for your continued support as we fight for those that are the most vulnerable in our communities. And thank you for supporting me to make good on my promise. Thank you for investing in a community where no one is anonymous.